Hello, Sket. How are you?
Good. How are you? Let's see if I can position this a little bit better. So there we go. Okay.
It's good to see you, my friend.
How's it look on your end? All right. Sound okay?
Yes, you look good. You sound good. And
Okay.
we'll be ready to go in a second. How are you feeling today?
Good. All's good. All's well.
Good to hear. So I want to just start this conversation off as I normally do with just a little brief background on you, and then we'll take it from there. And let me just turn my screen around and start this conversation with you. Just bear with me one moment. Here we go. That's a little bright. Okay. Just so we know. All right. So, SKET ONE, Andrew Yasker. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yep.
Your last name?
Yep.
Okay, great. Is a painter, illustrator, and designer who began his career in the early 1980s as a graffiti artist, and in 2003 started designing toy makers as Kid Robot, 3D Retro, Red Magic, Super Plastic, and more. SKET ONE has succeeded in exhibiting his custom resin works and canvases both nationally and internationally and in various galleries. SKET has a passion for uniting distinct components of pop culture into his pieces, and they are startlingly cohesive and original. Such innovation has led him to work with Facebook, CBS, Universal, EMI, DC Comics, Ford, Toyota, Coca-Cola, Warner Brothers, New York, and many others. And that's just scratching the surface, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess, I don't want to inundate everybody with my entire work history, but yeah, those are the big guys.
Well, it's, Sket, I guess in starting this conversation, but when we highlight career achievements, I think that's the one thing I always find quite surprising when I meet new artists and talk about their histories, as that, because we all start at this one place at, vandalism, writing, and so forth. And then we become these professional people with these big Fortune 500 companies. So we're going to explore this with you. But we want to really start at the beginning of your story, right? Which is in Connecticut. You were a young man. And so let's talk about this, because to my surprise, you were writing graffiti a lot earlier than I had known.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
tell me about the early days in Connecticut and your come up.
So I started out, of course, drawing as a kid, like any other kid. And then I would say once 82, maybe 81 hit in hip hop, like being in Connecticut and being in New Haven, Connecticut, I was really close to New York. So I used to get New York radio stations. So like, I was listening to BLM and Kiss, and, on Friday and Saturday nights, and I was getting all that, hip hop culture and all that kind of stuff. And then basically my dad worked in New York, so I was traveling to see my father back and forth on the Metro North, which is the train line that runs between New Haven and New York. So I was exposed, even though I was drawing at the time, I was exposed to like hip hop, like full blown at a very impressionable age. And I like dove right into it. I loved everything about it, and, I started drawing graffiti and copying stuff off of, record covers and stuff that I actually, would purchase. I was breakdancing at the time, and I even got into DJing. And, as I grew older, and the things that stuck with me were the DJing and the graffiti. And starting off graffiti is always a tough start. You sit there and you end up, playing with a bunch of names and trying to figure out your space. And it's so much learning going on.
Right. The first slide we have is a saint piece you painted
yeah.
on a wall with a character. So this really sort of foretold something about you.
Yeah, it's being so close to New York, I gravitated to names that, a lot. It's funny because I think a lot of graffiti writers, I wrote you know, there's this time where you're just playing with names and trying to figure out, you know, how you want to represent yourself, and you just start writing names. I wrote Saint, I wrote Maze, I wrote Terrorism. I was writing AJ Juice, which was my DJ name. There was just a bunch of like, oh, it was just, you know, all experimental. You know, I was playing with a bunch of different stuff. I was playing with characters, and I was drawing characters, and I was, you know, drawing things that I saw, you know, and that you know, I just wanted to put up on the wall, you know. And you know, there's all these things that when you start to paint graffiti, you know, you have to learn about proportions, you have to learn about, you know, the different caps and stuff. It's a lot easier, I think, nowadays for kids, but you know, back then it was you know, where you got your paint, how you got your paint. It was a little bit more adventurous, I'd say. So yeah, it took me a little bit to settle into SKET, and once I did, you know, that's what I stuck with, and that's what I basically, you know, latched onto. But as you can see in these early pictures, I painted a lot of Bodhi characters, and I collected comics at the time, and I was heavily influenced from comics, you know,
Sure.
Cerebus, Troll Lords, Bodhi, the early, you know, Ninja Turtles. I was collecting Marvel comics. I'm a huge fan, Fantastic Four. So with all these things going on, you know, I look back to the time I grew up in, you know, and you had, you know, I can remember being in my car specifically when I started driving, and I would be, you know, listening to, say, like hip hop one moment, and then I turn to, you know, the Smiths the next moment, and then the next tape I throw in would be like, you know, skate punk rock, you know, and hardcore. And there was just all these different kinds of music and all these different kinds of activities going on at the same time. You know, skateboarding was really big, BMX was really big, and you know, I got to meet a large group of people through all these different activities that I was into, you know. And
Explain, if you can, explain to us, because you're in Connecticut, and for, you know, what that connotes, right? Connecticut, very conservative, you know, really rural, or suburban rather. What was that environment really like, that all of a sudden from New York City, this culture that's Afro-Latino takes a hold of you, a young, small white kid from a good family, and all of a sudden you're probably swearing and spinning on your head and painting the walls?
Nah, not at all. You know, that's the perception of Connecticut. You know, a lot of people think of Martha Stewart and, you know, let's say Westport or, you know, Greenwich, Connecticut. But, you know, you have cities in Connecticut like Bridgeport and New Haven and Hartford that could give any New York borough a run for their money, man. Especially like New Haven. You know, New Haven is definitely, and Bridgeport's pretty bad too. So, you know, dipping into these neighborhoods and dipping into the city of New Haven and Bridgeport, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't all, you know, green grass and, you know, white picket fences. It was pretty bad.
And so in those days, when graffiti and hip hop was taking a hold, and you settle in SKET, and as we're looking at this wall with a character, and we see notes of what's to come in your future, but I'm wondering who was alongside you, who were your peers, who were the pioneers of Connecticut graffiti that
so as I grew up, I ended up linking up with essentially I ended up linking up with Eros, who is you know, probably like the leader of BLT, and Eros was very influential in teaching me, you know, how to write, what to write, you know, giving me a lot of knowledge that I needed to know, along with Brat. Now, Brat is Dooley O. Dooley was the creator of Graffiti TV, which is, it used to be, well, it still is. It's basically a video series about graffiti and about writers and and what they produced and stuff. And I helped him with all the production of his packaging and stuff like that in the 90s. And then I also grew up with this one writer named Kem, but not the Kem 5 that everybody knows from Connecticut, this other writer, Kem. And I think back, and during the 90s, this is when we started to like venture out of Connecticut, and we started to meet people. And I ended up becoming friends with E-Rock, who went to Southern Connecticut College. Now, E-Rock was from Fairfield, but he was friends with a lot of New York writers, and he was in the crew IMOC. So when I became friends with E-Rock, and he introduced us to Cro-Mag and Core 2 and all these other New York writers, I kind of, you know, me, Eros, and a bunch of other Connecticut writers got put down with I Am Okay. And that's when we started branching out as far as out of Connecticut and into other states, you know, and doing graffiti in other states. At the same time, in the early 90s, I went up to Boston to go to the Boston Museum School of Fine Arts with Eros. And we, once again, ended up meeting even more people like Target, Alert, you know, Honor, Rise. And, you know, there were other New York writers that were coming up there at that time. And Boston was very active. And we ended up, once again, just making more friends and expanding, you know, our circle even further in the graffiti.
Can you tell us a little bit, this is pre-internet days, networking. Tell us about the importance, or both of the importance of the networking with writers, but also the kind of tribal mentality, right? How you guys find each other wherever you are, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, basically, it got to a point where, you know, in Boston, you know, of course, you know as well, not everybody clicks. So, you know, it was cool to link up with people that, you know, you would click with, and, you know, you ended up expanding on these things. You know, some of these people have been my friends for over, you know, 25 years now. And like you said, it was, you know, before the internet. So, you know, the way we would connect would be at spots. You know, you would just link up with people painting certain spots, and, you know, running into people and getting the feel for that particular person. If, you know, you never knew what was going to pop off, or you just, you know, here you are underneath a bridge or somewhere, you know, you just had to, you know, kind of, but for the most part, it was always like a good vibe. You know, we're all artists, you know, we're all trying to do the same thing at the same point. And
well, that's interesting that you should say that. You see yourself as an artist as a young kid, right? That you're claiming that. Yeah, we're artists. Yeah, we're vandalizing, but we're artists. And I think most people don't see that. Perhaps.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I was drawing before graffiti. You know, I was very involved in, you know, drawing things, whether it be copying comics or copying logos off of record albums or whatever it may be. But I feel every graffiti writer is an artist. It's not, you know, graffiti is not at all easy. There's nothing easy about graffiti. You know, it's typography, it's color theory, it's composition, it's, I mean, you know, just trying to get something proportionally up on a wall. Or on a train, for that matter, you know what I mean? It takes a lot to be a graffiti writer. And when it comes down to it, you're doing this all in the shadows. You know, there is no place, you know, at that particular time to just paint freely without worrying about it. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's a hard skill to pull together.
So how did you measure the risk reward?
It wasn't a risk or reward for me. It was just like, let's go paint. You know what I mean? It didn't. I don't know. It was for me. It was just like, you know, whatever day it might be, I call somebody up and it's like, yo, do you want to go paint? You know, and like when when that would happen, paint was my peace. You know, when I would paint, it was like my calm, my time to like just paint in peace, you know, for the most part. You know, I didn't have to think about anything else. It was my escape, you know.
So being that you were in Connecticut and you were, when, as a young kid in the 80s, you were seeing all these trains painted in New York.
Whoops. Sorry. Yeah.
Were you
tons of them?
Were you at courageous enough to go to the New York City train yards to paint, or your local yard?
No, at that particular time, I was too young, and I didn't have, I'll say straight up, I didn't have the knowledge to actually, you know, get into a train yard like that. I would go to New York on a regular basis to take flicks, and that would, you know, that alone would be a journey, you know. White kid from Connecticut walking around dressed in polo gear in the Bronx, you know, was a trip.
Yeah.
And you know, now that I look back at it, you know, I'm pretty naive to think nothing, you know, thank God nothing did happen. But, you know, I'd be underneath the 238th Street Bridge taking, you know, pictures of everything, and yeah, thank God everybody was chill, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Sket, outside of, I'll ask you this question. Outside of the skills of painting and designing, what did you gain from writing graffiti?
Perseverance. Definitely, like, I feel like graffiti is something you can't give up on, for me personally, not everybody, you know? I still paint to this day. There's always room for improvement. There's always room to grow, always room to expand your skills. And personally, I feel without graffiti, nothing else that I did after graffiti would have happened. I feel that graffiti gave me a ton of life skill sets that I can't even begin to tell you, because the list would be gigantic, you know?
Fair
and
enough.
That's, you know, that's everything from, you know, a cautious, you know, kind of outlook on life, and everything from a methodical outlook on work. And you know, I think every graffiti writer has, you know, this passion behind what they do, and that passion can be played out in other parts of your life. You know what I mean? Like it's a love, you know, it's a love for the art.
What I find interesting about your development and your love for the art is that it also kind of just brought you into this other space of bringing in character development into your pieces, you know, like, and which is not uncommon for graffiti pieces, but that it seems like if there's any place to start talking about where you started thinking about, I guess, creating characters, is on the wall first, right? And then that you would translate that into the physical world.
Definitely. Yeah, you know, like I said before about the comic books and stuff like that, like I was heavily influenced in drawing characters. You know as well as I do, characters are just a part of graffiti, you know, they go hand in hand. And I always enjoyed, you know, doing characters and stuff like that, you know, to complement whatever it may be. And I think throughout the years, I've always dropped characters in here and there, you know, even my own characters. It's good to get to a point where I was expanding, not just staying with stuff that's in comic books and stuff that, you know, people can relate to. It was like, for me, it was more like, let's, you know, when you start to venture out on your own and create your own creations, you know, you're just expanding on what you came up on, you know? So it felt natural.
And what's interesting is that you know, during this one period, you mentioned to me that you started your own T-shirt company, as, you know, potential clothing line. But then you ended up working with a sign company. And you mentioned that that's where you got your computer skills.
Yeah, me and Eros started a clothing company, I would say in the early 90s, and we produced a bunch of stuff under the titles Unity and Monkey Business, and that's where I learned about screen printing and Ruby Lift and, you know, creating, you know, stat artwork and stuff like that. It was like my first venture into kind of like commercial art. And that was all well and good. And we were moving forward. We were selling, you know, we had distribution in Boston and New York, and we were selling stuff, I think, as far out as Hawaii at one point. And then, you know, life hit me hard. I ended up getting married, having a kid, and I had to get a real job, you know. The responsibilities kicked in and stuff like that. So I ended up getting a job at a sign company where I started off doing neon, and then I was transferred to the art department, and that's where I picked up all my computer skills. They basically sat me down and said, you have to learn all this stuff to produce this work. And I was like, all right. So I sat down and learned it as fast as I possibly could.
What were you like? Were you like me by any chance, that you, in order to learn, you had to make graffiti on the computer?
No, actually, I was just amazed at the font choices. You know, that's when I started to learn about fonts and you know, all this. You know, I started to learn all this computer stuff, and I actually just got into signs and fonts, and you know, I'd have to do patterns for all the you know, the installers and stuff like that. So it became a really just a really fun new tool to like experiment with. And you know, I worked my way up from, you know, low level to creative director of that particular sign company in 5 years.
And so now you're acquiring all these skills, and I would imagine you're thinking, because around you, the ecosystem of graffiti writers and hip hop was commercializing itself, was branding itself.
Yes, it was.
And also something else was starting to shift in the culture, and that was the murals, right? Yep. How were you negotiating this professional life with all this exciting stuff that was just starting to bubble up all around the world?
It was like once the internet hit, it's what dragged me, I think, back out to doing a lot of painting and a lot of production, you know, of painting. And, you know, I ended up leaving the sign company into getting a job as an art director at a marketing company. And while doing the marketing work, I started seeing how what we did as graffiti writers can, you know, could be influenced into a style of marketing and a style of, you know, we always wanted to see graffiti on commercials and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But, you know, and then it got a little bit out of hand, I think, you know, the hip hop culture kind of like, you know, people would just latch onto it instead of actually pay its respect. But at the same time that this was going on, you know, we had things in the hip hop culture like Yo MTV Raps, and, you know, I was involved, like I said, in the 90s with putting out Graffiti TV and helping Dooley with all the packaging and learning how to do graphics for film. And, you know, at the same time, I was watching other people like Carl with Videograph and getting all that, you know, coming at me and stuff like that. And I started to see like how marketing and graffiti were almost the same kind of language. You know, it was all about getting up and getting your message out and getting people involved and getting, you know, almost like interacting with the user, which at that particular time might have been somebody driving on a highway to look at your throw ups or something like that. But,
right.
Go
you
ahead.
managed you managed to parlay it right towards towards commercial projects, and we've been looking at some of your murals, your public murals, and one of the things that I learned from you, and this was all new to me about you, was that you also started the Baudet Jam. Let me see if I can get, well, right before I jump to that, right now we're looking at some of your commercial images. And what's interesting, if we go back and we start seeing this new language, this visual language you're developing, this character language, right, in your work, that you sneak it in for your clients.
Yeah, I mean, some people, like I was explaining, some people come to me for SKET, you know, and what SKET does, and you know, the vibe of my particular style, or, you know, I do a lot of different things. So some people come to me for the characters, some people come to me for, you know, the composition and the layout stuff, and some people come to me because they want graffiti, you know, and I'm up for all of it, because my thing with working in marketing is, you know, there's a right way to do it, and then there's a wrong way to do it. And I like when the worlds come together in a perfect storm, and everything looks fresh, like it looks dope, but it's not, you know, over graffiti, or, you know, to the point where you're just like, oh man, that's just cheesy. You know what I mean? So I like to bring over some different concepts and some different styles, or something I might do in, you know, a piece, and, you know, bring it over to the corporate side, because, you know, they don't see that stuff. They don't, you know, they're not used to that. They're used to the, you know, cut and dry corporate kind of design, corporate kind of look that, you know, nowadays a lot of graphic designers do, because that's what they think they should do, or that's what, you know, they're told to do.
You know,
So,
you just you triggered a thought, right, about the graphic designer and the difference between a traditional graphic designer and somebody like you, is that you can walk away from the computer and show up like you see here with the Jurassic World project. You just show up and you create the illustration live in situ. You do the performance art, you're gone. That's it. Done.
Yep. And that's this particular piece is on YouTube. You know, they filmed the whole thing from start to finish. So if anybody wants to peep it, I did that for a Fandango. And like I said, some people will come to me to do my characters and do my style, or they say, here's this corporate entity or ID, you know, make it whatever you want, you know, expand
Tell me
on
about,
it.
if you can, tell me about this, the Snoop Dogg bus. What were you tasked to do for this project?
So this particular project, I did with a good friend of mine and incredible artist, Nick Sawyers. So me and Nick at the time worked for a company called Bad Juju, and we were tasked by Namco to create this bus for E3, which is a big electronics, you know, event up in LA every year. And Snoop had his own level in Tekken. So we ended up doing this particular bus for Snoop to roll up to E3 on. And yeah, it was a good time. We actually completed it in 2 days, and it was about 95 degrees. And yeah, it was a pretty brutal 2-day work.
Yeah. Did you get to hang out with Snoop?
Yeah, we actually got to meet him, got to talk to him.
Nice.
Super good guy, and super chill, and loved it, you know. And yeah, it was a good project, man. Like I said, man, there's some of these things that, you know, the perfect storm happens where you actually get to, you know, have fun and actually get to be creative and get to expand from the skills that you grew up with.
Yeah, and the best part, I think, in your story is that it's so you're directly engaged with your culture, right? You know, the whole hip hop culture, and then all of a sudden, later in life, lo and behold, you meet Mark Baudet, and that becomes a transformational moment, because you had already started doing the the Baudet Jam, right? Before you met him.
What I did was the concept for the Baudet Jam came up, and we decided that we were going to do it. And I had to arrange a bunch of stuff, and I was like, you know what? Mark lives up in Massachusetts at the time. I was like, let me use my network of friends and try to get in touch with him and ask him if he wants to come. So I reached out to Mark, and he was like, how can I not come? He's like, he goes, of course I'll be there. And he goes, he was super stoked on the whole project. And, you know, the weird spot about the space, which was in Bridgeport, was I didn't own the property, and I didn't want to dictate the spots. You know, I didn't want to say, okay, well, you guys get this spot and you guys get this spot. I wanted this to be, I wanted the project to be organic, and whoever showed up early, you know, you got a spot. And, you know, and I just asked people to use the same background color. And that was basically it. And then, you know, we promoted the show at that particular time. You know, we were using 12-ounce Profit, which was a big, you know, message board and stuff. And we promoted it through that. And the only spot I did save was Mark's spot. And people ended up sleeping out, you know, to get a spot for the jam. And the turnout, I mean, just look at that spread and the names that, you know, showed up.
Let's clarify for folks, what they're looking at is not a magazine spread. These are photos of the wall that was produced, of the walls.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, these are all photos. I mean, crews like FC and, you know, Revolt was there, and just, I mean, Wizard and Ewok, and just all these people that, you know, that I just absolutely respect and love their artwork and have so much to thank for. You know, I remember Henry actually drove up that day and was taking pictures, and I was literally just floored at the turnout. And it's awesome because, you know, Mark's dad gave us so much, you know what I mean? Vaughn Bodie, I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like he, you know, I have so much to thank for. I don't know, his style and his mind and what he created and what Mark carries on is just, I don't know, I've always been drawn to it, and I've always given it the most up respect I can possibly give him.
I would agree with you. There's something special about the universe of Vaughn Bodie. You know, of course, there are the drawings and the exotic women and characters, but there was also the writing. It's interesting how we you know, I'm sure, and I've heard this plenty from writers about how they inject themselves in this universe, and they're like, well, I'm the frog, or I'm the Cheech, and so on. So yeah, he did heavily influence a lot. And so, but something else happened that was really important about meeting Mark. You met Tristan.
Yeah.
So tell us about this, because this is the game changer right here.
Yeah. So this particular, so I became friends with Mark during this particular time. And I would say this is around, I'd say this is around 2002, 2003, I think 2003. And Mark's like, hey, come into the city. I'm having a show on the Lower East Side, and I'm going to take a look at the Cheech Wizard toy. And I was like, oh, word? And, you know, I was like, oh, damn, I didn't even know you're making a toy. I knew about Kid Robot because, you know, like I said, there was, I collected toys my whole life. And basically, you know, through the web of graffiti writers, I knew that, you know, there was these toys and graffiti toys, or graffiti hip hop influenced toys, coming over from Japan. And of course, I already previously knew of people like Cause, who have kind of dipped into this, and I knew of the world. So I was like, okay, cool. So I'm coming down, I'm going to Mark's show, I'm at Mark's show. Tristan shows up with the prototype of the Cheech Wizard, the 10-inch Cheech Wizard, which is Kid Robot's first toy. So Mark's looking at it, and he's, you know, tripping out on it, and I'm tripping out on it. And, you know, me and Tristan start to talk, and we start to, you know, just talk back and forth about one another and start to learn each other. And Tristan's like, yo, you write? And I said, yeah, I write. And he's like, yo, you know Illustrator? And I was like, yeah. He's like, check this out. And he pulls out a dunny, and it's a early prototype dunny. And he goes, do you want to do some designs for this? And I was like, I go, yeah. And he handed me a CD with the templates of the dunny and this toy at the time called Toro, which Tristan also created. And that was it, man. I went home. I think I went home that night, and I started designing, you know, skins for the toy. And I sent him back to Tristan within a week, and he was like, dope. And that was it. That was my first, like, oh shit, you're gonna make a toy.
How amazing, so, right? And you know, but it, you know, really speaks to the advocacy within the culture, right? About the networking and the opportunities artists create for one another that change lives. Really, that moment really changed your life. If I
never met Tristan, I would have never have ended up doing it. And then further that year, I think, you know, 6-8 months later, Tristan was actually having a show on the Lower East Side, and he's like, I went up to support him, and actually he showed me this right here. This is the prototype of my first dunny. So he gave me this, and when I was holding it in my hand, I remembered, I was like, all right, this is it. Like, I'm gonna take this and run with it. And I actually ended up, you know, through the internet and self-promoting and learning out, you know, about toy production, I got involved with a company in Singapore called Play Devil, and they actually produced my own first produced toy, which was a character that I was drawing at the time, because I used to do throw-ups, and I would draw an eggplant for my E, and I ended up doing this particular toy right here, which is called Eggster, which is my own character and my own first produced toy. So yeah, so all these things happen.
Let me ask you about the process, though, because this is early on, and you're handing off sketches to somebody to render. Are you hands-on modeling it?
Yeah, this particular toy, I actually hands-on modeled it. I also sent drawings and illustrations of the toy, because at that particular time, I thought that that's what I should do. You know, I was like, okay, I'm going to get them an actual prototype, and then they can work off this particular prototype.
Yeah.
And then when I did that, you know, they made the toy larger, and of course they cleaned up 1,000 different things on it, and they technically re-sculpted it. But they had this particular rough sculpt to go off of, you know.
So let's talk about these dunnies that you are kind of, it's funny because the satire is really funny, right? In terms of like using condiments, right? Where did that idea come from, that you would attach condiments to the dunnies?
Back in the day, I used to write all my ideas in a book. You know, I would just keep a book of ideas, and I would sit there and I would write. What happened was before I get to that, Tristan invited me to do a custom dunny show. And it was the first time I realized they sent me this big 20-inch dunny, and it was blank. And Tristan's like, yeah, man, do whatever you want. And when he said that to me, it really opened my eyes up to customs. And I was like, holy shit, I can actually do whatever I want. You know, it's blank, and it's left up to me. And when doing that, that's when I started to mess with the shapes and started to do a lot of my own sculpting and adding things to the shapes, and, you know, clothing and accessories and stuff like that. So at this particular time, I would write down my ideas in a book, and toys have becoming very popular. A lot of people coming out with their own sculpts, and a lot of people promoting these blank shapes and stuff like that. So there was a show up at Channel 1, which was a gallery in New Haven, and I had to get some pieces ready for the show. And I looked in my book, and it said mashup products. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do some products. And I was like, okay, let me grab some products that actually, you know, meant something to me growing up as a kid. And not only that they meant something to me as a kid, that they actually kind of complemented the shape of the particular toy I was doing. So the first customs I did were all hand sculpted and all hand done. And I did ketchup with a dunny. I did mustard with a Madel, and I did Tropicana with a Teddy Trooper, and a Hershey's syrup with a Money. And those were the first customs I did with products. And when I did that, there was just this huge reaction from the community of, especially with the ketchup one.
Let me see if I may have a copy of it.
Yeah, right there. So it was just a huge reaction, and I think it was because, you know, it was something new. It wasn't done before, you know, within the toy industry. It was a new flip, you know. People weren't expecting it. It's like, holy shit, that looks like a ketchup bottle, but it's a you know, a dunny. Oh, you know. So yeah, and I always dug it, you know. There's, you know, with working with marketing and brands, you know, there's a lot of brand loyalty that I think kids from the 80s and 90s and even the 70s, you know, grew up with, because, you know, we were marketed to. And those particular items, you know, hold a feeling or a sense. So when you look at those things, you know, there's a certain nostalgic vibe that you get from looking at, you know, products and stuff like that. And you know, I happen to be a pretty basic brand loyalist, I guess you would say. You know, there's stuff that I buy every time, and it's because I like it. I grew up with it. You know, it's a part of me just as much as it's a part of, you know, the company.
One of the things that I find interesting is that while you're alluding to childhood, but, you know, then you do these kind of the take on the Corona, which I love. As an adult, I love this. I think this is just genius, and that you accessorized it with that lime.
Yeah,
on point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love, like, I grew up drinking Corona. You know, I absolutely love Corona. It was my go-to beer. You know, but you know, what I try to do with the customs of today is I expanded the materials, I expanded the effects. I want to give the buyer something unique and something elegant. You know, I try to make things more of a sculpture piece rather than just, you know, I hate referring to a lot of the stuff as toys, even though they are. They're more than toys, you know. They're creations. They're not, you know, a lot of people just buy this stuff and they put it on a shelf to let it, you know, breathe and let it, I don't know, give them a visual. You know, they're not giving it to their kids to play with and to throw around.
Sure, and you know, it's interesting that when you contextualize it like that, right? Because at the museum, the when they're in display, and when people arrive there, they're just so blown away. They're first they're in awe of course, of the design, but they're just like, I had no idea this was so important and so valuable.
Yeah,
right?
And I wanna say thank you to you guys for showcasing my pieces. I really appreciate it. I really do, because yeah, no, it feels good to be able to show people that there's a, you know, that this came from graffiti, this came from design and art, and, you know, this whole particular genre stems from the culture.
But it's interesting because we had a Clubhouse talk about vinyls, and you know, and right now it's an interesting time in terms of how it's being surveyed. you know, like traditional art, you know, people are like, wait a minute, these things are important. And that's in part due to the success of Cause and his vinyls, right? That they are hitting Sotheby's and all the markets. Um, you know, where do you see your work in context to, let's say, a formal art market? Is it a separate lane for you that you're not interested in, or where do you see this fitting into the future in terms of acceptability in the arts? I may have said that all wrong. Let me think
I
about
see
that.
it. I mean, I mean, honestly, it's gotten in. It is modern art. You know, it's a part of modern art. You know, the production stuff maybe not so much. You know, Brian has built up his name and built up his brand so strong that his production pieces, you know, are very collectible, and he has a wide reach with his collectability. And you know, there's people that have, you know, like Michael Lau and Eric So and the brothers Worker, and you know, there's all these early pioneers that have created just amazing works of art. And you know, they're not in Sotheby's, or you know, they should be, or they might be auctioning off in other places and stuff like that. Me personally, I'm just happy to create. At the end of the day, I'm happy to create. I've had pieces at auction, and I've had pieces, you know, in art shows, and you know, in galleries and stuff like that, and you know, I have pieces in your museum. So I'm thankful for any time I have an opportunity just to show my creativity and show my pieces that I create. You know, I'm very thankful for it.
And you know what? What's interesting is that you are adapting with the times, and you went ahead recently and dropped your NFTs. And I wanted to tell me a bit about this, about your NFT drop and adapting to this new platform.
So, yeah, you know, I've done the crankies with Super Plastic, and we did physical items, and we still sell physical items, and I've done this, and they reached out to me and were like, "Hey, we would love to create these as NFTs." And of course, at the time they reached out to me, I was like, "Well, what the hell's an NFT?" So we had to, you know, they sat there and discussed it with me, and then of course I dove into it and basically got as much knowledge about NFTs as I possibly could when this whole kind of ramp up started. And watching the first NFTs go off for Super Plastic, I was like, whoa, okay, all right. You know, it was surprising, you know, but it was really cool, you know, to see this new lane generated. Now I know they've been around for a little bit, but as far as me being interested in it, or me having knowledge of it, that definitely wasn't on my radar. I did not know enough about them when they hit, but when they did, now I know plenty. And yeah, it was exciting. You know, it's just exciting to be.
Yeah, tell me more about it, about the anticipation and then the end result. Did you feel that it was satisfying, that it was successful?
Well, I think it's more cool to see the creativity of the NFTs be produced. You know, you have all these different artists with different styles, and you know, I've seen some crazy NFTs that I'd be like, okay, well, that's a little out there. You know what I mean? And then I've seen some NFTs that my jaw has just dropped. You know, people like Roger Dean have created NFTs, and
Wow.
other, you know, I know Murakami just created some. And so there's people that, you know, I'm just like, okay, I see what everybody's doing and stuff. And, you know, what Super Plastic created with the Crankies, you know, their last release with Matt Gondek was way more animated and very active. And I could see, you know, this is becoming, you know, a very active space, a very active creative space that artists are going to. And, you know, and then you have the whole auction part of it, you know, which is in itself is mind blowing, you know, because it has to do with crypto. And even crypto, not everybody, you know, is up on crypto. So it's yeah, it's amazing. It's, you know, it's kind of like watching the vinyl toys, you know, get popular back in, you know, 2004, 2005. You're just like, whoa.
Well,
You
it's
know,
exciting for sure.
I'm sure you experienced the same thing, you know, back in, you know, the 80s when Graph went to the galleries and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. A whole new platform makes it a very different discussion, right? And this one brings up a much more complicated discussion between technology and finance, right? And IP issues and so on. As we start closing out, you know, one of the things that you've been working on, which I'm looking forward to seeing this live actually, is your new drop, which is the Reaper.
Yeah, the Reaper is
here he is, and
yeah,
wow, he is amazing.
Yeah, this is a project I worked on all last year, and I'm super stoked on it. It's a, you know, a cool sculpt mashing up, you know, the Graffiti Reaper, and we got a lot of fun stuff with it. I got to do everything myself. You know, there was no kind of constraints on budget. There was no constraints, you know, working with I Am Retro, who is my partner in producing this. And that's where it's going to be actually sold from and distributed from. Creating this particular piece was just fun because we were able to do a lot of stuff where we have interchangeable hands, interchangeable caps, interchangeable accessories. It's just, for me, I would rather have these things to be more interactive than just sitting on your shelf. I would like people to be able to customize them and make them their own. And you know, if they want a different hand stance, and then they can, you know, take those accessories and put those in. And if they want a different cap, maybe a fat cap on it instead of, you know, maybe an actual German thin, you know, they have that option. Like, that's what I find to be interesting with these particular sculptures, is having people, you know, when they buy the piece, instead of just sticking it on their shelf, like kind of customize it to their own liking, you know. So that's what I'm looking forward to with this particular piece.
And when should we expect your drop date on this?
Well, we did a pre-order drop date, which we did with Network, and those are finally landing this week. So people will be receiving them this week. And then probably like in 3 weeks, if we have any stock left over, they're going to be released on iamretro.com. And
so tell me about this. You bring up an interesting issue about quantity, right? That
yep.
You're not proliferating the market with 1 million of these things. There's a finite number. And why do you choose to do that with your drop?
There's got to be some collectability to this stuff. You know, just like prints and just like a canvas, or I think any kind of creation of art, the availability and maybe the lack of the availability is what makes something collectible. You know, what makes something rare, what makes people want to have it, because they know there's not, you know, 5,000, 8,000 other people within the world that have this particular piece. So producing this stuff on a limited level it's what drives the collectability. You know, not everyone is going to be able to own one, you know, and that's how, I don't know, art, I don't know. I just feel like, yeah, it makes it special. At the end of the day, that's what makes the particular piece special, to know that that I'm one of, say, 700 people out of the world that have this.
Yeah.
So,
you know, and that's a good point, because even if you think about that, you know, one of 700, and I know collectors like to have collections as small as 100, right? And not realizing, again, the market space is in the millions, and you are an exclusive group of 700. That's incredible, right? That's a wild number spread right there.
Even some of the resin customs that I produce are you know, less than 50, you know, there might only be like 25, 30 pieces. So yeah, that's, you know, that's what's really fun, is when you get to create limited edition pieces that, that make people feel special as much as you feel special creating it.
Do you foresee a show, a museum quality show focused on vinyls?
Oh yeah, there already was. There was a show up in Toronto, and I think Pharrell had something to do with it. But it was a really big show that I forgot the name of it. It escapes me, but I had a bunch of Dunnies in it, and there was a bunch of people involved in the show, and it, you know, from the pictures I saw, I didn't actually get to see it, but it was all vinyl driven, and I was in a show that was out here at a smaller museum up in Northern California. So I do know that there's shows happening, and there's pieces that are happening, and I know that people are even talking about a museum just for, you know, collector designer vinyl.
Yeah.
So it's good to see, you know, Tristan and Kid Robot, I know, have pieces in MoMA, so, you know, that have actually been put into it, and it's good to see that people within the modern art community understand and give this, you know, a little nod. You know, I definitely think it's not, you know, it's obvious, you know, this has been around for now close to 25, 30 years. So it's not going away, you know, it's going to only keep
No,
going.
it's, you know, when I often talk about, when people ask me about the future of some of these things, I think the future lies in self-publishing, right? That the tools have gotten so refined that you can publish at home, that you can do so much of this production on your own.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
you could start the next Kid Robot if you like, if you got the thick skin for it, let's just say.
Yeah.
But the bar was set high by people like Tristan and yourself and others who have not looked at this so much as a manufacturing issue, as a creative issue, right? As a real art making process, from A to Z. And there is something very different in that kind of mindset than what the mindset may be of a toy maker. Let's see, right?
Yep.
They're making toy, you're making art.
Yeah, I mean, I know people who have kind of, you know, Tristan actually did some work for Hasbro, and I get, like, you know, once again, it's that world of, you know, bringing over, you know, your art into the corporate world, and, you know, the skills lending each other back and forth. Yeah. And I do know toy designers that do designer vinyl that have worked within the toy industry and actually have created, you know, corporate toys and kids toys and stuff like that. And it was funny. I remember back in I think it was 2004. I went to Toy Fair in New York City, you know, which is just basically straight up all corporate toy companies.
Mm-hmm. I've been to one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, we ended up carving, you know, the designer vinyl people that were coming up at that time. You know, we ended up carving like a whole alley of us, you know, and it was just weird to see this little independent row of artists that were creating at the time. And I remember being next to people like, you know, Alex Party and Funko, and, you know, Scene was there, and I'm trying to think of all, Vice was there, and it was just all these people at that particular time that were doing their own independent dive into this new road. And it was funny to see all the corporate people walk down the alley and just be like, what the hell is this shit?
They had no idea, right?
No, they did not get it whatsoever at all. But, you know, fast forward, I don't know, 5 years later, and you see Taco Bell ripping off Dunnies.
But what effect, let me ask you something. What effect do you think it would have had if somebody like Hasbro are no, they're a game board company. What's a good toy manufacturer? Let's just say hypothetically, Hasbro says, I want some of this. I want to jump in this space. How would you react to that? To big box?
It just wouldn't. When that particular formula, like a company like that, they're going to talk about budget. They're going to talk about price points. They're going to talk about, all these restrictions on creativity, which are just going to kill a project. They're not going to give you free reign. They're not going to let you produce what you want to produce. Like if I came to them with my eggplant character, they're going to be like, get the hell out of here. It's an eggplant. I don't want, what's this mean? So I feel like, there's always going to be that entity of the corporation that's going to, you got the suits against the creatives, there's always going to be that battle going on, so I don't think I don't think that's why it hasn't worked out. I think Funko has created an interesting part because they've literally have mass produced licensed toys in a very cool way, I guess I could say, like a very, you see a pop and it's not whack, but it's kind of cool. They've created this whole other genre within the vinyl industry. They were like, it's funny because they were bobblehead people, and then pop happened and they turned into this giant corporation.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Just when you thought there was no more room, something else shifts the whole game, right?
It never stops, man. It's always growing. Everything.
I'll leave you with this thought, and then everybody out there with this thought that hit me once when I was at the museum and on a tour and talking to people about all the vinyls and stuff like that. And I said, what's kind of interesting, right? These guys, they all started as toys. We all started as toys. And then you end up as toy makers. Right?
Yep. I listen, trust me, we all started as toys.
Yeah, and again, you ended up as a toy maker. So it's a pretty phenomenal story, right? That arc is pretty crazy. Listen, I want to really thank you so much for your time on behalf of the museum and our crew over here. We enjoy your contributions, and we support your work. I see OG Slick on board. He's another guy. We had a good talk yesterday, and he had his successful NFT drop. It's one of the things I love, Andrew, is that when we engage, right, as a community and start to learn from one another, and you start realizing something like, wait a minute, in a weird way, it doesn't matter where in the planet you started as a writer, we all have this common thread. And then somehow that kind of just starts evolving as our talents evolve. And you did exceptionally well with your talents. And we really appreciate you for that. So
I appreciate you guys. Without you guys,
so thank you.
Without you guys, there would be no me. So I appreciate you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. I stand on the shoulders of many unsung heroes, man. And so for my part and our part here, to advance, support, and champion people like you and all the artists that are here, and people who are interested in the culture. This is why we do this, right? This is why we program. We get to know each other. We get to know a little bit more about our work, and that we could, promote new things, and so that we could support them, right? So we support you, and we can't wait to get some of this in house.
Yeah, I think you guys. Allison already has some in house. So
yeah, there you go.
If you guys want to grab stuff, get over to the Museum of Graffiti.
Yeah, there it is. Sket, my brother, thank you so much.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
And again, be well, be peaceful, and restful in your journey ahead. Yeah, we'll be in touch. And thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care, brother.